discussions on climate negotiations, it feels that we're already quite advanced. And at least as far as I can see, there's been relatively little thinking so far about how to construct a way of making these measures WTO compatible. And that's why I think negotiations urgently need to start on constructing a compliance regime within the UNFCCC that is at least as robust as those for CITES and Montreal, and which enables and includes a range of trade-related measures.
WTO rules do not as such hinder climate-related action, just as climate objectives do not in themselves hinder trade policy or free trade or trade liberalisation. We do need to develop new green technologies in order to cut the link between economic growth and energy use. And one of the best ways, one of the most effective ways of ensuring that really is through trade. The climate negotiations belong in the UNFCCC context, and they are challenging as they are, and I think we have to be careful not to be so keen to do something for climate change that we start adding issues to their already very full negotiation agenda.
So the question is, how do we try and create the ambiance, the environment, for doing some of what Dita was saying about adapting the coherence between these different regimes? Somehow a reporting system has to be created that addresses the trade side of it, the monetary side of it, and the climate side of it, so that we can have the foundation for enhanced monetary and climate coherence in these areas.
Climate change is such a serious issue. There are things that can be done within the WTO context without frustrating the climate regime and actually supporting the climate regime. I would say, why not? We should go for it. We should do those things. What people will argue is they'll say, well, the Kyoto Protocol does not contain specific trade obligations. The UNFCCC does not contain specific trade obligations. That's right, but we don't know what a post-2012 agreement will look like or any other agreement in the future. Why not get a good decision on this to create that space so that we do need to implement trade-related measures in a future climate change agreement? We can.
If we are looking for a trade answer to the climate problem, we may actually be overloading the multilateral trade regime. Right now, the WTO is a regime that is struggling to address its very own issues. But if a climate regime, through international consensus, were to decide that trade measures X, Y, or Z are important to fight climate change, then I would be all for those measures, and WTO rules, as Pascal Lamy has said, would adapt.
Actually, the place where it's warming fastest is the Tibetan Plateau. And so when I'm talking about abrupt climate change in the next centuries, and therefore we need to use the political power of those tipping points, and literally those glaciers hang above India, they hang above China, to say that it's not just adequate to take refuge in old formula like separate but differentiated responsibilities, because actually it is in your interest and your people's interest to do something.
We need to call upon the international sources of public capital and the multilateral development banks, the regional banks, and the WTO Council, even with suspended negotiations in Doha, to be coherently clear that they're all trying to figure out how to do this, and each will do its bit in a constructive fashion. Otherwise, there's a tendency to say, let somebody else do it, and we'll sit around and pick up the pieces, or create the economic opportunities which undermine the effective implementation of the new agreement.